Hey, it's John. Welcome back to the show. And welcome to the first episode of a new series that we have here on John the Music Nut. This series is called Latter Day Albums. The focus of this series, the premise of this series, to talk about latter day albums from a legacy band or cult band or artist catalog that didn't sell quite as well, didn't have the same popularity. Maybe not a lot of people know about it, but those of us who do know the album really, really enjoy this album. Before we talk about the album, let me introduce my distinguished guest here today. You no doubt know him from his channel, Bicyclelegs, talks music as well as his appearances on the Contrarians, as well as my channel here, John the Music Nut, Mr. Daniel Bosch, also known as Bicyclelegs. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
Oh, John, thank you so much for having me for the first episode of what I think is an excellent concept for a series, may I say.
Ooh.
Um, Really good idea to look at these bands that have long catalogs. And often it's the early albums that everybody focuses on. And just to talk about some of those latter day albums in those catalogs that turned out to actually be really, really good albums. And I think the one we're talking about today definitely fits into that category.
I totally agree. And the album we're going to talk about, ladies and gentlemen, is Accelerate by R.E.M. This was released on April 1, 2008 on Warner Brothers Records. This is their penultimate release. They would release one more studio album in Collapse Into Now, and then they would end a band. They have not been a band since about 2011, 2012. This album was recorded by the trio of REM. They were a trio since the Up album. The musicians and singers on here are Michael Stipe on lead vocals. We have Mike Mills on bass guitar, Peter Buck on lead guitars, and we also have Scott McCaughey on here on various instruments, as well as Bill Rieflin on drums. So Bill Berry was not on this album. He had left the album. I'm sorry, he had left the band after they released New Adventures in Hi-Fi. This album would hit number 2 in the United States. It would go to number 1 in several countries in Europe, including United Kingdom, Ireland, Switzerland, and Norway, and number 1 in Canada as well. It went to number 13 in Australia. This was produced by Jackknife Lee and R.E.M. So, before we get into the album, Daniel, when did you first get into R.E.M's music?
It would have been in the mid 80s, and I was over at a friend's place on the weekend, and we were watching one of the sort of Saturday afternoon clip shows where they would show film clips and all that sort of thing. And I saw the film clip for the REM song Fall on Me,
Okay.
which and I was instantly, I was like, this is a beautiful song. I love this song. And I started following their career from that point. I didn't start buying their albums until a bit later on, but I was always following what they were doing. Whenever they had a new single out, it would get played on the clip shows, and I would always enjoy it if it came on the radio and that sort of thing. So, yeah, they're a band I've been following since uh, I think 1986 was when Fall on Me came out, if memory serves
Yes.
me correctly.
Right.
So yeah, so it's been a long time, about 40 years.
Okay. I remember when Radio Free Europe first hit the airwaves, and that would have been off of Murmur. And I remember when South Central Rain got played. They played them a little bit on MTV, but I remember hearing them on our pop radio stations. And I also remember when Fall on Me came out from Life's Rich Pageant. The first one I bought was Green. And it was one of the first CDs I ever owned too. I bought it when it came out in 1988 when they signed that big deal with Warner Brothers Records have after they had their first 5 albums and Dead Letter Office as well on IRS. And I was into them through probably about 96. When Up came out, I didn't care for it. And I fell out of I stopped listening to them. I would always go back to the albums that I knew. Later on, I went out and bought all the IRS albums because you were able to a little while, not too well, like 10, 12 years ago or so, you're able to find those used pretty frequently, but you can't really, not much anymore. These albums I didn't really get into, but I heard Accelerate. I heard some songs off that. I'm like, wow, they're rocking again. And I don't remember if they ever rocked like this before. Maybe Life's Rich Pageant. And then I got back into them again. And then after that, I bought the whole catalog. Well, all the proper studio albums as well. And Eponymous. I've had that for a long time. I gotta ask you this, Daniel. Did you ever see them live? Or did they ever hit Australia?
No, well, I think they may have come here, but I never got the opportunity to see them live, unfortunately. But I will say, I have a very similar story to you. I think after Monster, I kind of
Okay.
stopped. I, I didn't pay as much attention. They weren't getting as much radio airplay on some of those later albums and that sort of thing. And as I was saying to you before we started recording, a lot of these later R.E.M. albums I actually managed to pick up at charity shops. And yeah, it's sort of a couple of dollars each. And yeah, I mean, some of them better than others, as obviously. But as we'll get into talking about this one, this is a beauty from sort of the end of their catalog.
I totally agree. And I picked up these albums, and we had discussed this before, the original album series. I picked this up. I'm gonna have to go back and look. I did get it on Amazon. I'm thinking 2017, 2018. I picked these up, and maybe I needed a few more after this, and then I had the whole catalog. So this album was a many people, many longtime fans would say is a return to form. We're going to talk about the album today, talk about what we really enjoy on here, what we may not be into. One thing about this album before we get started, tight. 11
Mm.
tracks, 34 minutes, 33 seconds, which is interesting because what had been going on with REM, probably from maybe Automatic for the People, the albums are just getting longer and longer, like creeping up around the hour mark there for a little while. And this was very lean and mean, very, very tight. Songs are very immediate. So this was an album that a lot of fans were hoping for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I was looking at sort of the stats that you're talking about. It's
Yes.
Monster was not that long, like it was 49 minutes, I think.
Okay.
And then after that, New Adventures in Hi-Fi is over an hour. Up is around the hour mark. Reveal is around the hour mark. Uh,
Around the
Around the Sun is almost an hour long. And it's 14 tracks too. So it's only 3 songs longer Around the Sun. And I think a lot of people will probably agree that Around the Sun was is probably for most people considered REM's weakest album. And it's probably my opinion too. Um, they feel a little tired on that album.
yes.
And the songs feel like they're extended beyond what they need to be. Even though they're not super long, there's really nothing more than about 5 minutes long on that album. There's also most of the songs are at least 4.5 minutes long. And, you get to this album, and as you say, it's 11 songs, it's only 34 minutes long, and a lot of the songs are sub 3 minutes.
Yes.
So they're really tight. And yeah, as you say, they are rocking on this album. And it, to me, again, probably goes back to Monster, because I remember when Monster came out, it was like, What's the Frequency, Kenneth came out. And it was like, wow, REM are really noisy on this song, whereas we'd been getting used to, you know, Green, uh, uh, Automatic for the People, all those albums. And, they're getting, acousticy, mandolin, all that sort of thing, jangle pop. And then Monster was a noisy album. And then, again on Up and Reveal, they started sort of messing around with electronics and things like that. And I love electronic music, don't get me wrong, but I don't know that it was a particularly good fit for REM.
Agreed.
And then, yeah, Around the Sun was just an unfocused album. I think even the band have kind of said that. So this album came as a really pleasant surprise when I was going back, delving into these latter day REM albums a few years ago, that this was the one, absolutely, that just kind of stood out from the pack as, wow, that's a good REM album.
I totally feel the same way. And I have that same feeling about Monster as well. I still love Monster to this day. I remember I was still buying cassettes at that point, but I bought that on cassette and then I bought it on CD. That album was a little divisive here in the States. It sold very well, but you were able to get it. You to this day, you could still get it used for dirt cheap because a lot of people sold it back because they weren't, it wasn't what a lot of people expected. A lot of people loved it too, but it was a different kind of hard hitting album. There was still a lot of the atmosphere there that you had on the previous albums. It just rocked a lot harder. And Peter Buck, he fell in love with all those pedals on that album with his guitar. This is just more, it's like closer to punk in spirit.
Yeah.
The production, the production, I think, suffers a little bit from loudness wars. Doesn't it seem a little bassy? To like when I'm,
Yeah.
if I think about the bass tones, like when I think about the way the songs flow, it feels a little bit like Life's Rich Pageant, but the production is a lot louder, and you had a lot more albums back in 2008 that had that kind of recording where the
Yeah.
bass was really clear on the early albums. Here, it you can hear it, but it's like a little too muffled, I would say. And the
Yeah.
guitars definitely sound louder.
Yeah. That might be a bit of a Jackknife Lee thing too, because around this time, within sort of like a couple of years of doing this album, he also did the Cars comeback album, Move Like This.
Yes.
Well, he did a number of tracks on it. Some of the tracks were produced by the band themselves, but he produced like half a dozen of the songs on that album. And they kind of have that, heavily compressed kind of sound to them as well. But I will tell you one thing, John. I reckon that this album might have been remastered a little bit for streaming because I listened to it on streaming last night and I was listening to it on CD. And then last night I wanted to take some notes, but it was getting late in the evening, so I didn't want to disturb my neighbors. So I put the headphones on and put it on streaming. It sounded better
Okay.
on streaming than it did through my CD player. And usually it's very much the other way around with music. I always think that, the CD or the vinyl or whatever usually sounds better than the streaming. But this one, I actually thought the streaming sounded a little better. So I wonder if it's been sort of, they've, you know, done a little bit of fairy dust on it with remastering it for streaming services.
You may be onto something there because I've never listened to this on streaming. I've only listened to this CD. So that's something I'm definitely going to check out after we do our show today. What do you think are some of the standout tracks on this album?
You know, People talk about albums starting with a 1-2 punch. I
Hmm.
think this album starts with a 1, 2, 3 punch.
Thank you.
Um, Living Well is the Best Revenge. Just great opening track. You know, it just hits you right in the face. And I love that you get these two guitar parts. One of them's very fuzzy and dirty and, and all that sort of thing. But then there's this second part just behind it that's still got that sort of REM jangle pop kind of feel to it as well.
Yes.
So you're getting a bit of both on that song, which I think is really, really cool. Um, and yeah, and then you have Man-Sized Wreath. And wow, I love this song because you get this real great contrast between the verses, which are kind of noisy and kind of dissonant and all that sort of thing. And then you get this real sing-along chorus to go with it, which I just love and it's only 2.5 minutes long too. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It comes, it says what it wants to say. It has these two different parts that contrast with each other, and then it's done. And it's a great sort of, it's one of those wonderfully dense Michael Stipe lyrics on that song too, which and then Supernatural, Super Serious. And can we talk also about these three songs? REM always had great in their sort of heyday, I think. They had great song titles.
Yes.
Ones that really made you think. And then we've got Living Well is the Best Revenge, Man-Sized Wreath, and Supernatural Super Serious. These are wonderful song titles. Um, but yeah, um, you know, Supernatural Super Serious is a bit more melodic than the first two, but it's still got plenty of those distorted guitars on it as well, and a little bit of the jangly guitar. Um, and then it's got this really great little middle eight, which goes in a completely different direction from the rest of the song, which just makes it interesting. And yeah, so you get this 1, 2, 3 punch with these three great REM songs that I think wouldn't have sounded out of place on any of those sort of like 80s, early 90s REM albums.
I agree with you on them. Supernatural, Super Serious was the single, and yes, it's that chorus is so catchy, so simple yet so catchy. I love the bridge on there as well. I love the counter bass lines. Mike Mills was like one of the best at the counter bass lines, I always thought. And
Mm,
you heard that a lot in those 80s albums. There's a wonderful bass line on Man Sized Wreath that goes very, very well. I love the way Michael sings these songs all for a long
mm,
time. Even after they hit their heyday, his vocals were a little lower in the mix. And on the 80s albums, I thought when the IRS albums, he had to strain a little bit sometimes to hear them. But here, he's attacking with his vocals. His vocals are very strong, but he's singing with a lot more enthusiasm than he has on many of these albums. And I think that really brings you in. Living Well is the Best Revenge. I mean, that riff on there is wicked, and that just brings you in. I mean, it's just bang bang the whole way through too, which is something that REM doesn't do a lot. There's usually these different textures. They'll change things up in the bridge, things like that. There's so many songs that we could talk about that are like that. But this one is like, okay, we have something to prove now. We put out Around the Sun, which was all over the place, unfocused, as you mentioned. And Living Well is the Best Revenge. I mean, it's just a hard hitting, kick ass track. Borderline punk. I mean, they come close to punk on a lot of these songs. And I really think all three of these are great. Another one that really grabs you by the throat is the title track. I think the chorus on here is magnificent, excellent, very, very well written, but the lyrics are poetic at times. I think it's really, really cool. But this is again is very, very hard hitting. A lot of lyrics are about what's going on in the United States at that point, particularly topically, politically. and it lit a fire under Michael. And I think that's why he's singing a lot of these songs with more gusto than he usually does. I mean, when he wants to sound beautiful and tranquil, he does that too. But a lot of these songs, when they're hard hitting, I think Michael really brings it on the vocals and the lyrics. And I also love Until the Day Is Done, which was also a single. It was actually the fourth single from the album. It really didn't do anything. But this sounds more like something that would be on the early 90s. It sounds very automatic for the people because of the way it's structured. It's actually a quite beautiful song, but it's very topical. But it's the way that the band approaches the song that I think really, really works. I think if this was an earlier single, the first few singles were actually the harder hitting ones. This may have gotten more traction if it was released a little earlier, not to take anything away from the harder hitting songs that we both enjoy. But I think it's a lot more mellow. It sounds almost like a cousin to the song Drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way it's written. I really, really enjoy that one. There's some other songs on here that I think they're more mid tempo, and I think they would sound well on an album like Up, which I'm not high on that album. There are some songs on there I like, but it was an album that I couldn't stand at first, but it grew on me over the years. And the song that I'm really leaning toward is Sing for the Submarine. What do you
Yeah.
think of that track? Because that one I'm thinking
Yeah.
has that feel because it's got the strings in there during the chorus and it has
Well,
more
yeah.
feel.
Yeah. And I mean, probably maybe not coincidentally, it's the longest song on the album. It's nearly
Right.
5 minutes long.
That's true.
It's definitely one of the more atmospheric songs. It doesn't have the electronics the way that Up does,
That's true.
which I think is a good thing. But it's funny you mentioned that one and Until the Day Is Done because both of those songs have that sort of 6/8 feel to it.
Okay.
You know, it has that 1, 2, 3, 6, and it has, I love songs that are in that time signature because you get that real sort of swaying feel to a song when it's in that tempo. And yeah, I mean, they're both really good songs. They're both kind of folky. I wanted to say, I was talking about those first three songs on this album. There's a lot of bands, legacy bands, bands that have been around for a long time, getting into the latter parts of their catalog, who would put out an album where the first two or three songs you're thinking, wow, we're in for a treat. And then it would just kind of slide downhill after that.
Yes.
This is not one of those albums.
Agreed.
This album maintains the quality throughout. There's none of these songs I dislike or even think are mediocre. Maybe, those first three songs are absolutely brilliant. The closing track, I'm Gonna DJ, is a hoot.
It is.
It's one of those sort of lot more light-hearted songs that REM would do from time to time, Um, I'm collecting vinyl, I'm going to DJ at the end of the world and all that sort of thing. Um, Love it, love it, love it. And Horse to Water before that is like short and up tempo and crunchy, and it finishes, the album, it finishes with these two songs that are barely 2 minutes long
Right.
each. Um, so yeah, I mean, I could talk about any of these songs because I really do feel like it's one of those albums that is quality throughout. But there is definitely, I think, if you split this into like a side one and side two of vinyl, which the re-release, like when it was originally released on vinyl, it was actually released on a 2 LP 45 RPM. So
Oh,
there was only like two or three songs on each side. But the more recent release has it on a regular single vinyl, which, you know, 34-minute album, it doesn't need to be on more than one disc. Um, you get the second half starts with Until the Day is Done. And it really does, that second half, have a bit more of a laid back feel than the first half of the album. You know, Until the Day is Done, Mr. Richards is more slow and more atmospheric and all that sort of thing. Sing for the Submarine, definitely. But then, as I said, it ends with these two sort of banger tracks, Horse to Water and I'm Gonna DJ. So I feel like there's a good flow. I feel like this album's really well sequenced.
I agree with that, definitely. Because just when you have those three bangers at the beginning, we go into Hollow Man, and that rocks, but it's got more of a poppy feel to it, particularly with
Mm.
that great sing along chorus on there. This is very, very cool. This has a wonderful vocal melody, but it's interesting. It has that sing along chorus, but the first thing you hear is that piano, and it's the piano
Mm.
and a vocal melody that's carrying the verses. So you're thinking, okay, we're gonna go back to Out of Time, Automatic for the People era here, and then it goes into that great chorus that anyone could just sing along to after hearing it a few times. It's very, very cool. So you're thinking, okay, the chorus is like a rocker, but it does have that ebb and flow, and the fact that it starts out with the piano, and it's like that in the second verse as well, which is
Yeah,
really,
absolutely.
really cool.
Absolutely. And the other thing about the chorus is that it's in double tempo from the
That's
verses.
true too.
You know, so that's what makes it, I think, catchier and more sort of pleasant to the ear and all that sort of thing. You think you're in for this sort of folky song with the piano, which I I don't know for certain, but that might have been Bill Roiflin actually playing the piano on that, because he certainly played a lot of keyboards as well as drums later on when he was in the touring version of King Crimson.
Right.
So. Um, yeah, but yeah, it then doubles up the tempo for the choruses. So, and then goes back to the quiet verses. And it's definitely a change of pace after those three bangers, but it comes as a sort of a welcome, almost a bit of a breather after, you know, a rollicking start with those first three songs.
You had mentioned I'm gonna DJ.
Mm.
When I listen to that song, we've never talked about this before. This band. Did you ever listen to Robin Hitchcock and the Egyptians?
Yeah, I have a little bit. I don't ha own any of it, but I know Robin Hitchcock through sort of like association with people like Andy Partridge and stuff.
Okay.
So I've definitely heard some of the music, and it's great stuff.
He had a song called Sometimes I Wish I Was a Pretty Girl. And when I listen to the way Michael sings this, it sounds so much like that, but it's a very light-hearted song, but catchy as sin. That's what I'm gonna DJ. It's like the way he attacks the verses, how he ends the lines in the verses sounds like that song, and that jumped right out at me when I've heard this song. Not when I first heard it, but when I've been listening to it lately, I'm like, yeah, this is so Robin Hitchcock, which is really, really cool. I dig it. Houston is a short song on here, very topical, but here we have more of that art pop that the band was doing from Up and Reveal and Around the Sun. You got the jarring keyboard lines being complemented by the strummed acoustic lines. And again, this is a very big change of pace here. Sounds familiar from their earlier albums, but on here, based on what Michael's singing about, it seems to work. And it's short, and it brings you right into it, comes back when it accelerates. So I really like
Yeah.
where this is placed on here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like what I was saying earlier about the sequencing of this album, I think is perfect. And it takes you on a little journey. And Houston is a song. Again, you know, it's got the acoustic guitar and the organ. Again, it's a 6/8 feel with the rhythm as well, which and it is the shortest song on the album. It's 2 minutes and 5 seconds. So, you know, as soon as you almost as soon as you start hearing it, it's over, which You know, again, I like the fact that these songs don't outstay their welcome, which I felt was a bit of a problem with Around the Sun, that some of those songs went on maybe 30 seconds too long, longer than they needed to, and that sort of thing. So, yeah, yeah, it's a great little sort of island in the middle of a storm, as it were, that would be side one of the record.
Exactly. Mr. Richards, we get loud again. You're thinking it's going to be another kick butt rocker, but it's more of a mid tempo tune with a memorable chorus on it. It it is a definite change of pace again, but I mean continues with Until the Day Is Done, not quite as elegant as that song. But again,
Mm.
this is a very topical song as well. It is very well done.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a more moderate tempo song, but it's still got the really sort of crunchy, distorted guitars on it. So I like that about it. Um, it's funny though that the slower songs tend to be the longer songs on the album,
Yes,
which whereas the faster ones tend to be the ones that are blink and you miss it. Um, but the one thing I noted with this song, but it I could say it about any of the songs on this album. The band are playing with so much more conviction than they had for a long time, I think.
I
And that absolutely comes through. The songs are all really good songs, but the playing is just so good as well. It's so complementary to the quality of the songwriting.
I definitely agree with you. One thing that I had read when I was doing my research is the band had premiered these songs during a 5 night stand in Dublin, Ireland, and they later released it on the Live at Olympia.
Hmm.
And they were just trying these songs out, and nearly all the songs from Accelerator on Live at the Olympia, but they were premiering these nearly a year before Accelerate had come out. So I think when they were going out and premiering these songs to an audience beforehand, which I don't believe they did much of that, if at all. I think they wanted to hear the reaction and they wanted to see how the fans were going to eat that up. And because a lot of those fans, like we were saying, they were waiting for a rock album again because we hadn't had one from REM in a long time. We had these albums that were an hour, and some of them were good, some of them maybe not as good, but sometimes there'd be a lot to get through. They wanted to see how the fans would react to these songs that just come and just hit you in the gut, like 3 minutes and 30 seconds, but very loud guitars on them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe in the early days they probably played songs before they recorded them and all that sort of thing, but which, most bands do. But it had been a while since they'd played songs for an audience before recording them. And I think that was a deliberate thing that they wanted to do just to try these songs out, but also just to make sure they were happy with the arrangements that they'd come up with for these songs as well. And I think it shows in the quality of the recording of this album that, they felt comfortable in the skin of these songs because they'd already played them live. So I think it was an excellent move to premiere them before they recorded them.
I agree with you. And what resulted was a very, very fine album here by REM, one of the great latter day albums, I would say. So, Daniel, how would you rate this album on a scale of 1 to
You
10?
know, this would be a solid 8.5, I think.
Wow.
A lot of people say, "Oh, this is the best REM album since New Adventures in Hi-Fi." I would go a step further. I think it's the best REM album since Monster. Um, and it's definitely of anything in the catalog from Monster onwards, this is head and shoulders. above the rest of those albums. Not that those albums are duds, but they are a little overlong and um, Collapse Into Now would come after this, and that would be their final album. And it's a good album. It's probably better than a lot of the other albums that came before it, but it's not as good as this one. And they immediately split up after they recorded that album anyway. So yeah, no, it's a terrific REM album. If I ever do an REM ranking on my channel, which is definitely something I need to get around to, I would say this is going to be, probably in the middle of the pack. It's not quite as good as, John, we've talked about this offline. I'm a sucker for those early IRS albums. I love, love, love those albums. This isn't quite as good as those, but it's an excellent album. And it's definitely, you know, head and shoulders, as I say, above anything they'd done since Monster. So, yeah.
Well, I'm smiling because we are sharing the same brain here. I also give this an 8.5. And in my head, I was thinking the best since Monster. And I love New Adventures in Hi Fi, but it's a little too long. There are times that it drifts. When it's good, it's very, very good. It's not as focused as this album. Yeah, this I give an
Yeah.
easy 8.5 on here. Are they the IRS albums? Not quite, but they're definitely in in the running for them. They're nearly as good. And I like this maybe a little more than the really popular albums. I mean, I like those albums a lot too, but I don't know if they're as consistent. There might be higher highs on those albums. It's hard to say. I'd have to go back. Well, we both have the catalogs, so I'd have to go back and
Yeah.
listen to them all myself. But yes, definitely an 8.5 for Accelerate for me as well. So, for all of you who are watching today, thank you so much for joining us. This is REM's 14th album from 2008, Accelerate. What do you think of this album? Did you buy this album when it first came out? Are you an REM fan? Do you prefer the IRS albums? Do you prefer the latter day albums from the early 90s when they started having a lot of hits, like Out of Time and Automatic for the People, which had more of an acoustic, rustic feel to them? What are your favorite tracks by REM? What are your favorite tracks off Accelerate? Have you seen REM live? Oh, one more question. What do you think of Around the Sun? The reason I'm asking this is because I've yet to hear anyone say a lot of good things about that album. Please
Mm.
let us know in the comments. Daniel, that's right, down there. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me today, joining me for the initial episode of Latter Day Albums, talking about a great Latter Day album by REM and Accelerate.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure, John. It's always great to do shows with you, whether it's on my channel or yours. And I look forward to collaborating with you again soon.
Absolutely. I am definitely up for that. What do you have coming up on Bicycle Legs Talks Music?
Well, I am hopefully planning this weekend to have a ranking out of the solo albums of Steven Wilson,
Okay.
best known for Porcupine Tree. Um, and obviously, beginning of February, I'll be having my anniversary album show. And I've got some collaborations coming up in February, including with Peter Kerr, with Davey Cretan, and hopefully with my son Max again.
Oh,
So look
nice.
forward to that.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to checking out those episodes as well. Peter Kerr will be doing a show with me on John the Music Nut in February as well. So, all of you who are watching, thank you so much for joining us today. Do what you love, and we'll talk to you soon.